All right, everyone. It is Wednesday. It is June 8th in Kitsap County. It is 1 p.m., a beautiful 66 degrees. So glad that you can join us for the best hour of your day. You know what time it is. It is time for tipping points and puzzle pieces. Let me bring up the star of the show, Mark Boatwright-Frost. Mark, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm having a rough one this morning, but we'll talk about that shortly.
Absolutely, we will. Um,
A lot on my
Yeah.
mind.
A lot on your mind. I know we talked just really briefly before, and I thought this is a great conversation. As you know, audience, I don't get let in on the conversation until usually the day of, and that's by design, so I can give a more authentic response to the conversation. I think it flows better in that format. And this day is none the different. It's just that this is going to be, I think, more sensitive than usual, which I'm very pleased about. So go ahead and jump in there, Mark. Let's talk about it.
So today's theme is imagine, and I had a whole completely different way to go with this. But I will start out the exact same way I was planning to start out before, which is to say, it is my belief, my firm belief, and that of resilient ecosystems, that if you cannot imagine something, you cannot create it.
Mm.
And from here, we were going to talk about the future and how to create a future and how you need to imagine the future. But I have a different topic to go, and I'm going to start off with explaining why it changed.
Okay.
Um, I started this morning off reading my Facebook posts, um, as I do most mornings, promoting the show and doing some other things. And a very good friend, Colleen, posted, and she does not post political stuff. She does not post bipartisan stuff. She doesn't post religious stuff. She talks about plants. She talks about the good things people do. She's a very positive person. But this particular post talked about her being in her home yesterday, and she lives across the street from a preschool, and the door was open, the screen had the air flowing in, and she was working, and it was a really pleasant experience. The children uh, cheering each other on. It was near the last day of school, so everybody was excited. And then the children started yelling loudly, like something was happening. And her first thought was, "Am I going to hear gunshots?"
Mm.
And I stopped and thought about it, and I realized that that resonated with me in the expectation of violence happening because people are hurting and in pain and are striking out because it's the only thing they can think of to do, even with whatever rationalization they can come up with. And so my day continued. I did the things I needed to do, continued to work, but that's been percolating in the back of my head. And then about an hour ago, I got in, I sat down, I looked at my screen and took a look at the videos. And there's a video of Matthew McConaughey in the White House press room. And I went, okay, what's this about? And for those of you who don't know, Matthew McConaughey's hometown is Uvalde, Texas. And as you probably all know, Uvalde had a mass shooting last week. And he was there to talk about that. And in my unkind moments and my very human, I won't say human, my very programmed social consciousness moments, the back of my head says, oh God, another actor posing and having something to say. And then I said, hold on a minute, let me just hear what he has to say, let go of that thought and sit back and listen. And I was in tears for the next half hour.
Mm.
He brought, this was not about him at all. Didn't talk about him at all. He just talked about Uvalde is where he grew up, where he learned to shoot a gun, where he learned gun responsibility. But that's not what this is about either. He brought every one of those children's lives to life, made them real, and put it in the face of the people listening. He brought the teacher who died to life and told her story, told each of their stories, read letters, showed artwork, made it real to everybody. And I have to say, like, I imagine other people feeling that we don't look at the news around this anymore because it's too much. And what do we say? In the last 156 days, we have had 240 mass shootings. In the last week, we've had 5. Here's my question on imagination. Can we imagine a world without mass shootings?
First, I'm going to put the link to Matthew McConaughey's complete remarks at the White House press briefing on C-SPAN. There's the YouTube there. For me, I would love to imagine it. I don't know if I can. I have no idea what that would look like, and I know we're going to get into it. It's not just gun control. It's going to take a lot more than that. So I don't know how to imagine that. I would love to be able to, but I don't know how.
I don't know if, well, I can imagine a future where that wouldn't happen, but I can't imagine a way to get there from our current place.
Mm.
It would take us all laying down a lot of our preconceived notions and come together. And I've been doing this work for about 5 years now. And that's a hard conversation to have with anybody. But if we start with, can you imagine a world without mass shootings? The original topic was, can you imagine a world that supports humanity instead of degrades it? Then, of course, people would argue that there's nothing being degraded about humanity. I said, and my response would be, I guess that depends on the shoes you're wearing.
Facts. How you doing, Michael? Michael says, it's not that it's too much, it's that it doesn't change. There's a horrific shooting, news coverage for 2 weeks, outrage for a month, and it's forgotten about. Laws don't change. There's too much money in guns.
And again, going back to, and Michael, I absolutely agree with you, but I think there's more to it than that. There's too much prestige in guns is part of the problem. Let me be honest, and there's a lot of opinions about this, but I've owned guns most of my life. I shoot guns. I've hunted, though not in the last 10 years or so. I know guns pretty well. I know calibers. I know what they can do and what they can't do. They're a tool to be used. I can't tell you from my honest point of view, what the hell anybody needs an AR-15 for, except that it's fun to shoot at the range and just shoot a lot of rounds through it. It's not particularly accurate. It's not particularly powerful. It's not particularly useful. There are a lot of guns that are far better to do that, but it looks like a military gun. So it becomes something about prestige instead of something about a tool to use to get a job done.
And I guess I hear what you're saying there, but at the same time, there are a lot of murders that are committed with handguns, and I feel like, you could ban, not you, we could ban assault rifles, but then folks will use the tool that's available, and yes, does it slow someone down because they're going to have to reload, they're going to have to carry more clips? Sure. Is that going to make them say, well, you know what? Maybe I won't do this because I don't have the convenience of having an assault rifle, Michael says, I have a 2-year-old daughter and I'm terrified to send her to school. Terrified. I had to ask my wife, a nurse, the other day, how far her office is from the front entrance, specifically to see if a shooter would get to her. Damn.
Yeah. Not such a good one, Rob, but we'll get there. That's it. The fact that we have to think about that. And in Bremerton, was it 4 years ago, 5 years ago? There was a guy, a child, over near Blueberry, the school down off of Sylvan. Um, yeah, that brought his gun to school, dropped in the backpack, and didn't he kill somebody with it by when it hit the ground?
I don't think the child died, but I think she was hit in the stomach with the round. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the story. It's just a month later, you forget about it. But I remember what happened. I remember that it happened. I don't remember the details about what happened.
And again, that's a handgun, not an assault rifle, which kind of really speaks to my point, right? So I
Right,
think the the argument, and that's why it's so hard to imagine a life without
right.
a world without mass shootings. Even just let's just take the United States alone, because I think then that becomes one. There's so many we could look at assault rifles versus
People.
handguns being used, but
Yeah,
you can conceal them. And again, you can carry multiple clips. There are extended clips, so there's a lot of things that you can do. And
yeah.
if you don't
Remember the
have a way to
Columbine?
protect yourself, that 5 second reload isn't going to do much for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, but remember Columbine, the one we remember starting this whole this process. At least that's the one I remember as starting the process. Was mostly handguns.
Right. Well, that to my point there, right?
Yeah, they were mostly handguns. And when you think about it, it's like again we're focusing on the tool and not the problem. Yes, we absolutely need to do a better job of checking the mental health of people who die. That's a given. Bo of the Fifth Column did a one recently about it. I thought he was challenged by
Well, hold on before you talk
some of
about
the
that,
advocates.
because you mentioned something, and I just want to make sure that we have perspective on that. It's one of the
Okay,
things that I like about our shows. We get to have a little bit
absolutely.
of a different conversation. I want to be really careful not to label all of this as a mental health issue, right? And then at the same time, is who is making this determination on if a person is mentally healthy enough to be a gun owner.
Absolutely fair point. Absolute fair point. Um, and that's all on me because I look at this and I think who in their right mind would go into a school and shoot people up. So that's on me, and I think of them as having mental health issues because I think the question in my head is who in their right mind would do this. But I don't want to paint it. I'm not a mental health professional. I can't paint it. But from my point of view, that's a question that comes up, and it's an opinion I have. And whether right or wrong, it's the there's a lot of subjects in life that I think about that with. And as you know, my point of view is that our culture is broken. And this continues to accelerate. We continue not to take care of each other. We continue to let the system roll itself forward and not sit down and have the conversations we need to have about how to not stem the bleeding because a lot of people are doing really good work trying to stem the bleeding, but the disease keeps growing and making more bleeding and more wounds, and we are not addressing the disease.
All right. Well, do we want to talk about the diseases now, or the disease now, or are there other factors like mental health or assault rifles?
Well,
What are some of the arguments that they give in the media?
everybody focuses on the AR-15, and as I just said, I don't think it's a particularly useful rifle to own. I mean, I can understand why people do, with all the pictures all over the internet of people standing there with their military grade looking gun. Um, but it's not a particularly useful rifle. If I was going to go hunting, I would want a much better rifle. I would like something like that has a little bit more capability of reaching a target over a long range of deer would be able to knock a deer down in one shot. That's not what an AR is for. But aside from that, we focus on the gun and we don't focus on the problem about why people go into schools and kill people, or grocery stores, or churches, or any number of places. What was it here? Was a party in South Carolina. Somebody basically drive-by shooting killed 6 or 7 people in Carolina that were having a party in their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So what causes that? I mean, we can't say that we're a healthy culture when we have 5 mass shootings in 1 week. So let's look at the bigger question, maybe. The disease. I have to ask the questions to kind of bring you here, because I could just paint it and tell you this, but that's not. You don't know who I am. You don't know the analysis I've done. You don't know anything about my life or anything that brought me to this point. So when we live in a world where people are thought of as tools to maximize profit and not as human beings, when we think about people as a means to get more for ourselves instead of working together in humanity to get more to support ourselves together, there's a big problem. And when we have so much fear about the risk to our lives, not only in schools and shootings, but the growing reason of homelessness is the growing lack of jobs, the growing lack of affordable housing, the constant manipulation of money to create things like the mortgage debacle, which a lot of people became homeless after. We have so many moving parts that it's almost unfathomable in its breadth of how many ways that people are considered pawns to gain money. Let's use a very simple business one, and the people probably don't even think about this. We have moved to a model of subscription. Every tool we need has a subscription to it. How many subscriptions does it take before you can't run your business anymore because you can't afford to? Because you need this new subscription.
Oh, I got you. So like Adobe or Canva or oh man, yeah, there are it is numerous, right?
And your personal life. Okay, we had Netflix for a long time that offered a whole bunch of stuff that was really cool. Now we have a competition between Disney, Netflix, HBO, Hulu, and every one of them want your dollar. And how long is it before you can't afford to do that anymore? And we start talking about housing. You know why housing prices keep going up? And why we keep hearing about shortages in housing? Is because people want to make money. It all becomes about money. The cities and the counties are money strapped because there's less and less money being in the government. We have $1 trillion deficit that nobody's talking about anymore. It used to be a Republican talking point. We can't tax people because it'll raise the deficit, or we can't do this because it'll raise the deficit. Well, now the deficit's we've not even talked about anymore. It's horrifyingly large. And that money that would have, if we had less of a deficit, that money could go down to support the cities, the states, the counties, and there would be more money for infrastructure. Now they're struggling for it, and in steps developers offering to make it cheaper to provide services, but at a greater profit and a greater cost. But they don't put the cost up front. They start off with, we'll take care of this, but it's not going to cover everything. So we're going to have to change order this until you're paying half again as much, if not twice as much as you were initially. It's how much can we bear being nickeled and dimed to death? And how does this meet into the culture? We have a culture of acquisition. Daniel Quinn in his book Ishmael calls it a taker culture, and I think that's highly appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are pawns to get more money, when does being human and supporting each other come into play?
Well, I mean, based on the way that you're laying it out, you would have to dismantle, this the capitalistic society that we find ourselves in. So, how would that even begin to happen? And as we
Well,
talk, the S word is a bad word. So,
so socialism or communism?
well, socialism for sure.
Yeah. So, and understand, I'm not saying that going to communism or anything else is the idea, or socialism. But socialism, we're the only industrial country in the world that hasn't embraced socialism in some form or another.
Well, that's interesting because you just basically put those two things together, socialism and communism. They are clearly two very different things. So you can have socialism without communism.
Right, you can. And I did that very clearly because those are the two things that immediately come up whenever you have a conversation about changing from capitalism or capitalistic model, and certainly the US capitalistic model.
Mm-hmm.
You're a communist, you're a socialist, and those are talking points. And actually, the next discussion we have, and I'm going to give you a spoiler alert, so you may want to plug your ears so you don't know what the topic is. But the next one's going to be called word games. And we're going to talk about words people use and how they're used to change the discussion away from change. Go ahead. All right. So, how do you change it? First, you have to imagine it. So, we're going to go right back to that. Can you imagine a world where humans are valued and supported? I can say we virtually have no experience with that.
And you're saying humans in general, right? Because depending on what humans, we all have subgroups of humans that we do value and love and care for, right? So we're talking about humanity, if you will.
Yep.
And that would be what everyone is fed, housed, clothed, have access to healthcare, things like that.
Yeah. Have all of the basics covered so that we can actually grow into doing more. How much? And here's a question that I think of all the time, and I actually rarely ever ask: how much of your personal time is spent trying to cover the bases before you can even think about anything else?
That's a good question. I wonder if people actually take the time out to look at that, right? Because it is much more than just clocking in for your work shift 8 hours a day, for sure. Michael says, valued and supported in mass? No. Valued and supported in a community sense? I think we have some of that right in Bremerton, just not enough.
Agree with you.
And that's what I was saying, right? There are pockets of really good folks, really good organizations that are doing the work.
Absolutely.
That love on each other. Folks they don't know, right? People that aren't in their immediate family or, close friends that are very supportive in that way. I do agree with that. Sounds like one of the things is trying to scale that up and build on what already exists.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about the disease a little bit.
Sure.
And we'll start off with, okay, this is a hypothetical. I'm in no way saying that there's a conspiracy theory or Illuminati or anybody out there running, but I'm going to ask a hypothetical that could lead people to think that that's what I'm saying, but it's not. It's just to give a frame of thinking and examination. If you were an evil mastermind that wanted to take over the human race and run us all to your benefit, what would be the very first thing you would focus on?
So say that again. If you're an evil mastermind and what?
And wanted to control the world and run the human race for their own benefit, and
Hmm.
all of the governments and everything, what would be the very first thing you would want to address?
Just putting that in the chat there.
I would posit that we would want to address the issue of human will and
Elaborate on that.
okay, so if I were the evil mastermind, I would look around me and do the analysis and see humans and realize that as long as humans thought for themselves and had the imagination to come up with ideas that could ruin my plans, that would be a big issue and roadblock in my plans to overtake the world. So I might put together something that would indoctrinate people into not asking questions and to perhaps not think or imagine. I would make imagination an anathema. I might do something like if a child is daydreaming, I would stop them from daydreaming and tell them it's a bad thing to do and they need to pay attention and focus in and focus on what they're being shown. And I might address the issue with human will first.
Well, for levity, I already have my laugh down, so I'd have to get the big white cat. All right, for the levity.
Yeah, Michael, the food and water supply would be next, but until you took care of the human will part, um, you would constantly at risk of a revolution or someone figuring out how to come around that. So, were that the case, then you would want to put in a compulsory system of indoctrination.
Uh-oh. Be careful there, Mr. Boatwright.
So, and again, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but it seems to me that in our culture, we have a really good compulsory system of indoctrination.
Facts.
And it was originally put in place to create workers for industrial systems back in the early 1900s. And it was pushed by industrialists to create workers that didn't ask questions and that were compliant to being told what to do. And here we are 100 and some odd years later, and we are seeing the result of people who are still more than likely to do what they're told to do for whatever group or reason it is. If we're looking at that, then we have to ask the next question about, what else is broken that is keeping us from embracing our humanity. And when you put capitalism into the play, and you start analyzing that, now understand, capitalism in its very, very base root is a really cool thing. It was to replace bartering amongst people. And then, we created coinage, and then we created the stock, going thousands of years into the future, we created the stock market to help invest in companies to allow them to expand their production and improve quality and get better innovation. That's not what it is today. If anybody still thinks it's that's what the stock market is about today and what investment in companies is about today, I'd love to sit down and have coffee with you and listen to your rationalization about that, or rationale behind that, because I cannot see that at all. But when you put it all together and you connect all the dots, it's still not a conspiracy theory, but it's a very broken culture that has been programmed over time by the people who get the most benefit out of it. And if you think of that as a cancer, and humans are looked at as pawns, and keeping people separate and othered benefits the few because then they don't have people that are going to be coming together to say, no, we want what we want
Mhm.
and what we need. When you look at all of that in around, you think that our cultural framework as it stands today is broken. And if you think of it as a cancer, you can understand that all of the racism, the poverty, and all of the issues that people are fighting, doing a magnificent job of trying to address. Um, Nonprofits all over the place, people all over the place giving of themselves are the symptoms of the disease. But nobody's really addressing the disease. And until you start addressing the disease, you're going to have more and more symptoms and more blood and need more and more people and more resources to address the symptoms of the disease.
So let me
And
ask you this.
again, it's just a hypothetical. I'm just giving it to you to think about
Right.
as how I particularly frame this idea.
Mhm. So as I'm thinking about it, and again, that's why I like getting it cold, so it's not
Yeah,
sitting in my mind. Um,
which is
would
what
a
you do best.
yeah, would we can't just dismantle what exists and then build from the beginning. Could we shift to a more hybrid, um, you know, um, capitalistic societal model where we say, hey, some of these items aren't going to fall under the list of things that you can capitalize on. So housing, food, health, education. Is there a way that we can move to that? We have private companies that are buying up all of these properties and putting people out and raising rents and using it as an investment vehicle. Um, so could we shift to that and say, hey, look, there's plenty of things to have a capitalistic mindset on and make money from. And yes, there would be some issues with, well, I sell lumber, so I'll make the price of the lumber expensive. So there's still capitalism in the housing. Um, but would that be a way to start? And if we're saying that we care about humanity and we're looking at the basic tenets of, let's just say, Maslow's hierarchy, right? The basic needs of safety, shelter, food, water, etc., that everyone gets that. And I also get that there will be some challenges as to who determines what is adequate for a person, right? I need a McMansion. I don't want to be in a tiny home. So how do you determine these things? Would
That's
be difficult, but how do we move toward that?
okay. So that's going to be episode 25. Just letting you know. But we have to move that way. And how we do it is we need to come together and talk about that. How we answer the question about who gets
Mhm.
what the baseline is people sitting down and talking together, not representatives, not politicians, not people who are unduly influenced by corporate dollars, but real people sitting down. But it has to be a lot of us sitting down and having this conversation. And it has to be happening in a lot of places. And we have to have a way to bring that information together and have other groups of people who are representative of the bigger groups talk about those until we can pare it down into a series of priorities and start moving in that direction. Now, a lot of people are probably going, and maybe not this crowd, I don't know, are thinking, well, why don't we just have a revolution and put somebody in charge that does it, that will do it our way? And I said, we've revolved 100,000 times in the last few thousand years, and we always end up in the same place, which means that we're using the same framework that's broken to reset to. What we have to do is not revolve but evolve.
So you know what?
We
I would agree with that statement, and I agree with that statement to the fact of, let's say that it's revolution or revolt. Most of that, I believe, is centered around wanting access to the system that currently exists, right?
Yep,
Not necessarily changing it. I need access to what everyone else has, or what the few have,
right.
instead of actually changing how things work. So I definitely agree with that statement. Um, I wanted to stay in the solution. I was thinking of your Habitat for Humanity. I know you love that. And Rob and I were talking. Oh, let me hit this chat here really quick. Uh,
Okay.
the disease is human greed. I'm not sure we will ever overcome that. Yeah, I think there's always going to be folks. I mean, we are human after all, right? So we're going to have those issues for sure.
Can
Um,
I can I put something in here real quick before you get finish that thought,
sure.
Michael? I agree and disagree with you. But this is not something we can really address here. If you want to have coffee sometime, please reach out, and I'd be happy to sit down with you, and we can talk about a different way of looking at greed. Okay.
No, but I think that'd be a great episode too, right? To have that
Yep. Well,
conversation.
it might be an episode. I just can't address it here and now because it's a much longer conversation than we have.
But I also like getting coffee, so I think that's fantastic. Uh, but anyway, what I was saying about Habitat for Humanity. So the way that model works, right, is however the family is picked, right? They help to build their house, and they can have individuals come in and whatnot and help. I think one way that one you cut down labor is you adopt that model, but you keep that model ongoing, right? So you just don't build your house, but you continue to help build others' houses, right? The saying of many hands make light work
Yep.
would be one way to shift into that, right? Cutting down on the labor, and now it's materials.
Farm building.
Not only that, it gives folks the skills to take care of their home as things need to be repaired and upgraded, right? So, you
Reduce.
can do simple things like change outlets or do these things because this is a skill now that you've learned. This is a skill that your kids are learning along with you for those that are of age to do that. But it's not that you just do it once and you're done, but you continue to help others to build their homes, right? Now all of a sudden you've kind of created this labor force that is there, that is trained to build in mass, and it cuts down on the expenditure of building the homes. And so that's one of the things that Rob and I were talking about. It's like I think that could be um, one way to try to work towards solving this issue. What are your thoughts on that?
But we have to rethink a lot of things, and for that we have to have discussions. We have good ideas. We don't move them forward because we hand them to somebody else to run with instead of driving them ourselves. My
Well,
entire my entire life is filled with that.
I want to hear what your thought is on that idea.
Oh, I think that that's a brilliant idea, and I think that that is going to be talked about a lot in episode 25.
Okay. Wait, what episode are we on now?
We're on 21.
Oh, I gotta wait 4 weeks. Are you serious? Wow. Okay, fine. Well, it gives me something to look forward to.
Yeah, we will be talking about that because
So you can't resist the evil maniacal laugh, right?
of course not.
It's
I just
infectious.
I just don't let it out all that much. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
I would definitely be on board for doing that. And I think there's a space for everyone, even folks that physically, can't get in there and swing a hammer, can do the paperwork aspect or, folks can come in and, if we do some things that build resiliency in and maybe instead of a yard or not a whole yard,
community.
we're building in a garden, right? That you're growing some of your own um, resiliency and sustainability and feeding that ecosystem, right? You
and,
think about
and
building
putting
with solar
uh,
or other things up front, right? To cut those costs down. Yeah, I think that would be one of many things that we could do. But that was an idea we were talking about recently.
I think it's a great idea, and there's plenty of examples of this. I threw in, as you were talking about it, I threw in one of my favorite examples is the Amish and their barn raisings, where the entire community comes together and they put up these enormous wood frame barns in a day or 2 days,
Oh,
and
really?
and they get fed. If you go to YouTube and put up Amish barn building, you'll see video after video of these people coming together and raising these giant structures in an amazing time, like 30 or 40 people all working together, and they help each other raise their barns.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. So there. I mean, if you're looking for a model for that, the Amish have been doing that for hundreds of years. Habitat Humanity does that now. The Jehovah's Witnesses, when a Jehovah's Witness temple is built, they come together and build it.
Really?
Yeah, the whole community.
So then these examples do exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoa. And you see that come poof, and it's up.
So yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? This is a great example. So, there's very very few new things under the sun. Just some people have to come around to saying, "Hey, you know what? I got a great idea." It's like, no, there's other people already doing it. But yes, it is actually a good idea. Why don't we do that? But this is a great example. I didn't even know about this. So thank you for that. I
You're welcome.
wanted to share it with everyone. But that's powerful. Look at that, right? That is many hands make light work.
Yep.
And if we're working in unison in that way, how fast does it take for us to house everyone? Especially when we remove the red tape. I think everyone obviously needs to be safe. But again, even with all the many hands, uh, doing some unique things and pulling out the obstacles in permitting, what's acceptable. We let all these big companies come in and we give them all these tax breaks and change permitting and other codes so that we can have them, create jobs. They're job creators when they're really just really siphoning off of the community in some really horrific ways and hurting mom and pop businesses. But
And
this
are
is
they
this is a
creating
powerful
jobs?
image here.
Yeah. Are they creating jobs, or are they outsourcing to out of city contractors?
Well, I mean, in regards to Walmart, many of their employees are eligible for SNAP benefits, right? They still don't make enough to provide for themselves individually or for their family. So, yeah, for sure. Look at that.
A lot of the U.S. military wives apply and get SNAP benefits.
Look at
In our
that.
Yep. And then afterwards, they're fed, and they are in community because they're Amish. They probably do hymns or prayers or whatever. I have no idea. But in a community gathering here, you get fed, and then that's when the musicians come out and play music and get together.
Well, and again, there's that, but look at all of that. Look at all of that knowledge, skill, and ability that is being spread throughout that community, right? That's a powerful thing. There's not just one person on there laying the roof down. There's like 8 or 9 people, laying that down and learning. Uh,
Yep.
Man, I love this right here. I think this would go a long way to changing quite a bit. And teams like this, you can have different teams. Folks just still go to work. They pick their day. They come out, and as I said, I don't think it would take long to build these structures and to house,
Yep.
uh, our communities.
And I think that we need to start having a long conversation about localization of things. Um, it it's pretty obvious now to most everybody that climate change is a reality, and things are going to continue to change. Food is going to be at risk. We've talked about that before. We'll talk about it again in the future. We have an agriculture industry in this country that does not pay a lot of attention to the future, but more likely quarterly profits.
Mhm.
And our food is not healthy anymore. There's study after study after study about the loss of nutritional value. And I think that we need to seriously look at localizing our food. We have a Food for All project because of that. We need to start looking at Shelter for All, which is what we're talking about here to some degree. And we need to figure out how that is. And we need people to show up with their pieces of the puzzle, which you've heard us talk about before, to have these conversations, because I don't have the skill or the knowledge or the imagination to answer all the questions, but I know that there are problems. But somebody here does. Somebody will ask a question, somebody will bring something and look at it in a certain way, and we'll all get caught off guard, and then we'll all start a discussion that will solve the problem. But before we can even start imagining how to solve the problem, we need people to show up and have a question and have that bring their piece of the puzzle, ask the question, bring their point of view, bring the energy. to drive it.
We definitely would need the permission to do these things also. So if we were to,
We need a lawyer.
man, I thought we were trying to dismantle this thing. You starting off with lawyers, like, good God.
Hey, a lawyer for the good guys, one with a halo.
That's funny. It's like, we need a lawyer. Like, oh, here we go.
Is that we need somebody who actually knows how to navigate the system.
Right. Well, and then there again, I think that is a great example of a transferable skill, right? It's not just enough to get us to come together and use that Amish model, but we need to apply that toward politics, toward government, right? And speak in one voice and advocate. And that is a huge issue.
Yeah, we need people that understand policy and can help navigate that and help us change policy.
Yeah.
And again, I'll go back to what I said last week. I had a conversation with a local politician or regional politician recently, and I said, "So, how many times do you have somebody come in and ask for something that you really can't do without a whole lot of whatever?" And I said, and the person said that they needed an accountant to figure that out. And I said, "What if 1,000 people came in and said that?" And I said, "Then he would be paying attention." The number of people coming together, even if we don't come together and you don't have an idea, or you don't have a perspective, or you don't have the question, you have energy, and you can listen, and you can think, and you can help imagine the future, and you have the energy to help us put this together and create the will to make it happen. Bring your piece to the puzzle. Every one of you has a piece. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle.
So let me ask you a question, Mark. And kind of going back on to what Michael was saying, right? There are, really good pockets of community that's already happening here in Kitsap. So what is the next step? And I know we talked about in previous episodes, some of the challenges of coming together and talking about what the issues are, and then, obviously having to rank, what those things, what are we going to tackle first, right? Which can be a challenge in and of itself, right? You have a willing heart, but then everyone has these different things that are their priority. But let's say we've gotten to that point. Like, what is the step? What are some things that we can do as organizers, as leaders, as individuals, to begin to metaphorically and physically build out what we just saw in that video there?
Well,
because we're already doing it. We definitely need to
do more of it.
Come together like Voltron, right?
Well, we need to create the opportunity for people to come together. But let's be honest, neither you nor I can. There's the old story about the mule. Okay, farmer sold or bought a mule from a mule driver, and the mule driver said to the farmer that the mule will do anything you ask it to do, but don't abuse the mule. Mm-hmm. So the farmer took the mule home. The mule would not do anything he asked it to do. And he finally brought the mule driver back in. The mule driver said, "Okay, I understand, and you haven't abused the mule." So the mule driver picked up a 2x4, walked over, and smacked the mule right in the middle of the head, and walked in and whispered something to the mule. The mule started doing anything that he was asked to do. And the farmer goes, but you said not to abuse the mule." I said, "Oh, that wasn't abusing him. First I had to get his attention."
What kind of joke was that? I'm like, where is this going?
It's actually an old story and all that. First, you got to get their attention. I can't force people to pay attention or participate. That's the real challenge you and I face. And
are you suggesting smacking people on the head with a 2x4?
Well, as I say, neither one of us.
You're thinking about that?
Neither of us. And it wouldn't be appropriate anyhow. But
that's funny.
And that's the bottom line here is we have to get people's attention, and people have to be willing to come together and sit down. But let's go back to the shootings and imagining a world without it. We live in a world of fear. COVID made that much worse. So, how do we get people's attention? One, and two, how do we get them to overcome their fear and be willing to have conversations together about a better world, whatever that looks like? Amish buildings, local food, and how do we even start the conversations to prioritize it? My only answer to that is that we have to create opportunities for that to happen. And we are, and you and I and our organizations are already creating those opportunities via the fourth Thursday barbecues. By the way, we are looking for July and August people to step up. So, Michael, if you want to step up and get together with your neighborhood, we'll come out and help host a barbecue for you.
Well, remember, we have July, so that would be August.
Okay, so August then. So
So,
that's an opportunity. We're talking about another opportunity in autumn. We don't have a solid on that yet, so we can't really talk about it. I
and the
am
pancake breakfast also is another one.
pancake breakfast on the fourth Wednesday of the month at New Horizons Ministries on 4040 Wheaton Way.
Nice.
I am looking at other opportunities where we can expand and have events that will work. And I can't talk about those yet either because they aren't solid yet. They're in discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't like putting people in awkward positions by announcing something before there's a solid yes.
No, I'm sure that they would appreciate that for sure. So, again, for others, um, we know what we're trying to do and what we're attempting. For the listeners, you know, what can they do, or what can they take back to their organizations or their communities to stimulate what they're already doing so well and building on it.
And as we're closing in on this one, I'll reiterate the question we started this with.
No, you
Can
didn't answer the question that I just posed. You got to answer the question I just posed.
okay,
You want me to restate it?
yeah.
So the question is, we know what we're doing, right? The pancake breakfast, the neighborhood barbecues. What can the listeners do, either as individuals, or what can they take back to their organizations or communities to build on the great work that they're already doing? You have a few suggestions for them?
We are better together. And so, what I would say is reach out. And part of what Marwan and I are working on is to create a facilitation process, for so to speak, um, that will connect people together and begin conversations about what everyone's doing and seeing if we can create synergy. Synergy is a great word, where the whole is far exponentially greater than the sum of its parts. So doing it on your own is great. It's fabulous. As a matter of fact, it can't celebrate that enough. But no, not but. And if we have several groups working together, much more can be done. If we get a lot of people together talking and creating a group, like, oh, let's say the Kitsap Resiliency Project, which is owned by you and representative by the people of Kitsap County, that's the goal of it. Maybe more can be found and maybe more can be done. So reach out. Let's start conversations. Let's figure out what everybody's doing. Let's start letting everybody else know what everybody's doing so that people are aware of what's going on and maybe more can happen because of that. So I'm going to have Marwan put up the info at reseco.org email address.
Sure.
Reach out to us, and I will cycle Marwan in on this. and we will be able to see what people have to say and see if we can put together events where people can have, or just coffees maybe, where people can sit down and talk and share.
And I believe you talked about that a while ago of maybe creating a space, a coffee hour where folks can kind of come in and we can meet in person and chat. I think that'd be pretty cool. Nothing crazy.
Just a simple coffee time. And when we do those events, they're always posted on the Kitsap Resiliency Project page on Facebook.
Absolutely. And I'm just looking for that now. Oh, there we go. Bam. All right. Well, we have 3 minutes left. Again, what I wanted to do is actually just check in with you and see how you're feeling now at the top of the hour. When we got first logged on, when I asked how you were doing, you weren't doing well, right? You said you spent some time in reflection, you were in tears, and we've had this conversation. How are you doing right now?
I'm still a bit in shock. Um, that conversation that Matthew McConaughey had brought home the reality of it. It was no ignoring it. He did an absolutely wonderful job. As you and I mentioned before the show started, the questions, he walked off without answering any questions from the press, and the questions being screamed by the press in the press room, oh my God, they were inhumane.
Mhm.
They were amazingly inhumane. And I was ashamed to be of the same species as some of these people.
Mm.
Um, Others of them, I don't even think they're human, but that's beside the point. Um, it was shocking, but I kind of want to reiterate the question we started with, saying, can we imagine a world without mass shootings,
Mm.
or even in America without mass shootings? Can we even imagine it? Because if we can't imagine it, we can't create it. So I want to challenge everybody out there to spend a little time this week imagining what a world would look like without mass shootings.
I really love that question. Um, we are seeing it, right? Every day in the news, it's a tragedy. And the definition of mass shootings in this country is four or more. But there are so many where it's one or two. And, one is too many, unfortunately. Uh, but it right now, it is what it is. It's our reality. And I don't know how many of us actually do think about what would it actually take to have a world without this happening, right? Because we know that there's basically two main parties, and both of the things that they're putting forward aren't going to work. So the ideas, the solutions are going to come from the voiceless, right? Those whose voices aren't heard, that are impacted by this. Um, but no one is listening to them, if they even speak up. And oftentimes we don't speak up because we're not being heard. It's like no one's going to listen anyway, so I'll keep it to myself. But the solutions are out there. And I think we need to be bold in trying different things. And if that doesn't work, we try something else. But we can't look at it like, well, I don't know how that's going to work or how we're going to do this. And so, well, we'll just status quo until we find the panacea, the magic bullet. That's a bad frame. So I apologize for that. But um,
And I think that Marwan and I can promise that we will continue to try and create forums where people can bring their voices. I mean, that's really the heart of what we do. And I do want to say this because I want you to hear it from me. I know I present strongly and with a lot of passion, but I'm not an expert on everything. I just connect dots well. And I am more than happy to hear your voice, please, because if I'm wrong, I want to know it. So bring your voice.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's the final word. With that, I'll just say, when I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching, one of the things that I recognize is the person who's brave enough to ask the question or make the statement, so many other people in the classroom have that same question or thinking those same thoughts, but they are too afraid to speak up, right? And they've been told, you don't speak up, you're going to look stupid. People are going to drone and, oh, wow, really? Why are you asking that? And so the change is going to come. And the more people that bring their voice to the table, the more empowered others will be to bring their voice to the table. So we do definitely encourage you. We love to see you participate in the chat. Do reach out, even if you're watching this later, type in the chat because we will respond to those questions. And as always, we just want to thank you for watching and participating and helping us all to build community and work toward these solutions. But we got to have these conversations.
And I do have one last word.
Sure.
Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change. You are the change."
All right.
Being
Well,
your voice.
that is Mark Boatwright-Frost, Resilient Ecosystems. I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. We will see you next week at the same time, 1 p.m. And please join us at 3 p.m. for our housing conversation. It's going to be our deep dive today, so you won't want to miss it. All right. Until then, goodbye, everyone. Thank you, Michael.